If you're new to our channel, we'd love to have you join our little community. Just hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. I promise it will be worth your while. I've always listened closely to what my mother has to say, especially when she reminded me to take my vitamins, a habit she insisted upon after my father left. For a long time, it was only my mother and me, navigating life together in our small, familiar home. Those ordinary days held extraordinary details if you paid attention. The way sunlight hit the kitchen tiles, the rhythm of laundry spinning in the washer, and the quiet moments of reflection when helping her fold clothes. It was in those moments that I first noticed the subtle difference in our wardrobes, her clothing seeming to radiate a gentleness and charm of its own. My jeans and t-shirts were practical, utilitarian even, but her wardrobe had a soft elegance that drew my eye, a texture that felt comforting just to touch. I remember one afternoon in particular when I was in the bathroom, the warm water streaming over my shoulders, and my gaze drifted to the neatly hung stockings she left on the shower bar. She explained to me once that caring for your appearance, choosing your clothing with intention, was a form of self-respect, a way of nurturing the person you wanted to be. I didn't fully understand at the time, but the idea lingered in my mind. One day, curiosity got the better of me, and I found myself standing in front of her dresser, carefully observing the way each item was folded, the colors and fabrics arranged with a kind of quiet thoughtfulness. Everything felt alive with her presence: the silks, the soft cottons, the neatly organized drawers full of everyday elegance. After school, when the house was quiet and she was at work, I would sometimes revisit the dresser, running my fingers over the textures, inhaling the faint but comforting scent of the perfumes she wore. There was a serene pleasure in simply observing, in noticing how the details of her life reflected a sense of care and thoughtfulness that I had not yet learned to cultivate in my own daily routines. I marveled at the elasticity of some fabrics, the way garments were designed to move gracefully with the body. I tried on some of her clothes purely out of curiosity, intrigued by the sensation of stepping into her world, her carefully curated choices. It was a strange, almost surreal delight to feel these fabrics, to notice the subtle differences in fit, texture, and smell, as though I were glimpsing another version of life through these small, quiet rituals. Then one day, my mother came home unexpectedly while I was exploring these garments. I froze, the realization that I had been caught sending a rush of adrenaline through me. But instead of anger, her face held a quiet curiosity. We did not speak at first. The moment was dense with unspoken understanding, the kind that passes between family members who know each other's hearts well enough to sense the emotions behind actions. There was an awkwardness, certainly, but also a warmth, a reminder that the bonds of trust and love could withstand small acts of curiosity and personal exploration. That evening, the house returned to silence, and I went to bed reflecting on the gentle complexities of identity, belonging, and self-expression that had begun to surface within me. A year passed before I returned to explore these ideas further. I discovered boxes in the garage filled with remnants of earlier times, clothing, fabrics, and keepsakes that had once been part of her life. The textures, colors, and even the faint, lingering scents spoke of continuity and transformation, of the way our personal stories are stitched into the objects we touch every day. I felt a surge of wonder and appreciation, realizing that these items were more than mere possessions. They were markers of a life lived with intention and care, a reminder that self-expression is as much about presence as it is about appearance. I immersed myself in this world, trying on items, examining fabrics, and taking note of the shapes, fits, and tactile qualities that spoke to me. It was a private ritual, one that allowed me to explore, learn, and appreciate the nuances of who I was becoming. The following morning, I spoke with my mother about my interest in her wardrobe and the sense of joy it gave me. I was nervous, unsure how she would respond, but I needed to share my thoughts. She listened intently, her eyes reflecting warmth and understanding, and we had one of the most profound conversations of our lives. She explained that exploring one's personal style and understanding identity was a journey, one that could be guided with love, patience, and support. It was a turning point, a moment when the safe, nurturing environment of home became a place where curiosity could flourish and self-expression could thrive without fear of judgment. In the years that followed, I continued to grow, both in body and in mind. I noticed changes, small and subtle at first, that made me reflect on who I was and how I related to others. My mother encouraged me to maintain my routines, take my vitamins, and engage in creative pursuits. School became a space for observation and reflection. While athletics were not my strongest suit, my mind found joy in learning, experimenting, and connecting with others in thoughtful ways. I noticed how different people expressed themselves, how friendships formed and shifted, and how my own sense of self began to crystallize. I found joy in the ordinary, organizing my studies, observing the interplay of sunlight on the classroom walls, noticing patterns in clothing, hairstyles, and personal gestures. These small observations became the threads of self-awareness that wove together a clearer understanding of identity. Through mirrors, reflections, and careful observation, I began to notice subtle physical changes, the way my body developed its own unique proportions, the curves and lines that were becoming more pronounced. These observations prompted conversations with my mother, who provided reassurance, wisdom, and context. She explained that growth and development are natural processes, each person experiencing them differently, and that the most important thing was to embrace these changes with self-respect and curiosity. Our conversations were long and thoughtful, filled with questions, answers, and reflections that helped me understand not only my body, but also my mind, heart, and place in the world. Each morning and evening ritual, each careful consideration of clothing, hair, and personal expression became part of a larger journey, a journey of self-discovery, self-acceptance, and the nurturing guidance of a loving parent who always listened and guided without judgment. Even as adolescence brought new complexities, questions of identity, curiosity about friendships, and developing a sense of aesthetic and personal taste, I found myself returning often to these rituals of reflection, observation, and expression. Mirrors, fabrics, colors, and textures were not mere objects, but companions in understanding who I was becoming. My mother's guidance remained steadfast, offering knowledge and reassurance, while I explored ideas of self-presentation, creativity, and personal style. I learned that personal identity is a continuous process of observation, reflection, and thoughtful experimentation. It is the careful balancing of what feels natural, what feels expressive, and what resonates with the self we are discovering and creating. By the end of these formative years, I had developed a profound sense of appreciation for the subtleties of life, the way fabrics could communicate elegance, the way hairstyles could frame personality, and the way thoughtful rituals of self-care could instill confidence. I had learned to observe without judgment, to experiment with care, and to reflect on the nuances of personal identity in a way that was nurturing, safe, and joyful. My mother's presence, guidance, and encouragement had become a cornerstone in this journey, reinforcing that identity is not merely assigned but discovered, shaped, and celebrated in the quiet, careful moments of life. As the years unfolded, the quiet routines and tender guidance of my mother continued to shape the contours of who I was becoming, both in the ways I saw myself and in the ways I navigated the world around me. The sense of discovery that began with curiosity about fabrics and textures gradually expanded into a more profound understanding of identity, personal style, and the interplay between self-expression and confidence. Each morning, as I rose and moved through the rituals we had cultivated, carefully choosing clothing that resonated with me, brushing my hair with patience, experimenting with subtle accessories and appreciating the small yet deliberate choices of color, shape, and texture. I felt a growing harmony between my inner self and the outward reflection that greeted me in the mirror. There was an almost meditative quality to these moments, a way of slowing down time, allowing me to reflect on the layers of experience that had brought me to this point, and on the lessons that continued to unfold with each passing day. School, which had once felt like a space of observation and tentative experimentation, became a stage on which I could test these lessons in self-presentation, interaction, and confidence. I learned to navigate friendships with sensitivity and attentiveness, noticing subtle dynamics, and learning how to support others while maintaining my own sense of identity. I developed an appreciation for the diversity of human experience, understanding that each person's journey was unique and that respect, empathy, and observation were keys to forming meaningful connections. I discovered that the act of reflection, looking in mirrors, examining the way fabrics moved over the body, noting the subtle interplay of colors and textures, was not merely about appearances, but about understanding myself, recognizing the choices that felt authentic, and shaping the life I wanted to lead. As I grew, I became increasingly aware of the small rituals that carried immense significance, organizing my space so that it reflected my personality, tending to my wardrobe with care, taking pride in the way my belongings were arranged, and noticing the way sunlight and shadows interacted with the rooms I inhabited. Each gesture, no matter how seemingly mundane, was imbued with a sense of intentionality, teaching me that attention to detail is a form of self-respect and a reflection of love for the life one inhabits. My mother's influence was ever present in these discoveries. Her patient guidance, thoughtful insights, and gentle encouragement provided a foundation of security that allowed me to explore confidently, make mistakes, and learn from them without fear of judgment. Together, we cultivated an environment in which curiosity and self-expression could flourish, in which I learned that my sense of style, my preferences, and the ways I chose to present myself to the world were legitimate and meaningful, and that they could evolve in tandem with my growing understanding of who I was. There were days of uncertainty, moments when I questioned whether my choices reflected who I truly was, or simply what I imagined I should be. But my mother's steady presence and thoughtful conversations helped me recognize that identity is not a fixed point, but a process, a series of explorations and reflections that deepen over time. I learned to value the act of journaling my experiences, noting the ways my perceptions shifted, the small victories of self-discovery, and the lessons embedded in everyday interactions. Each note, each reflection, became a bridge between past experiences and future growth, reinforcing the idea that understanding oneself is an ongoing endeavor, shaped as much by observation and introspection as by action and experimentation. Beyond the intimate sphere of our home, I began to notice the subtle signals of individuality expressed in the broader world, the way people moved, dressed, and carried themselves with confidence or hesitancy, the ways communities form around shared interests or values, and the ways in which empathy and attentiveness can transform even fleeting encounters into moments of significance. I found that paying attention to these patterns allowed me to navigate social spaces with a nuanced awareness, enabling me to choose interactions that resonated with my values and to distance myself from those that did not, all while maintaining authenticity in my self-expression. In parallel, the physical changes I observed in myself, the natural progression of growth, the development of my own unique proportions, and the ways in which my body moved and expressed itself, taught me the importance of embracing change rather than resisting it. My mother's words about the beauty of intentional care, self-awareness, and acceptance resonated ever more deeply as I recognized that identity is not something imposed from the outside, but something cultivated from within, nurtured through deliberate attention. reflection, and care. I also began to explore hobbies and interests that aligned with my developing identity. Creative pursuits such as sketching clothing designs, experimenting with different hairstyles, arranging my living space in ways that expressed aesthetic harmony, and discovering the joy of thoughtfully crafted daily rituals. These activities provided a sense of mastery, accomplishment, and personal satisfaction, reinforcing the lessons of intentionality and self-expression that had been present since childhood. With each passing year, my confidence grew not because of external validation, but because of the inner understanding that who I was and how I chose to express myself mattered, and that cultivating these aspects of life brought both fulfillment and resilience. I learned to navigate the complexities of social dynamics, recognizing the diversity of perspectives and experiences, appreciating the importance of empathy, and developing the ability to communicate thoughtfully and respectfully. These skills, combined with a deepening sense of personal style and identity, created a foundation for independence and self-assurance, allowing me to approach challenges with creativity, poise, and confidence. The relationship with my mother remained central, a wellspring of guidance, trust, and encouragement. Together, we explored new opportunities, celebrated milestones, and reflected on the lessons of the past, all while nurturing the evolving sense of self that had taken root years earlier in quiet moments of curiosity and observation. Our conversations, often long and reflective, became a space in which I could articulate hopes, doubts, and discoveries, knowing that I would be met with understanding and support. I realized that identity is a living, breathing construct, shaped not only by our choices and actions, but also by the relationships, rituals, and observations that inform our understanding of ourselves. In the culmination of this journey, I found profound satisfaction in the harmony between who I was becoming and the values and practices that had guided me along the way. I had cultivated a sense of self that was resilient, thoughtful, and deeply rooted in observation, reflection, and intentionality. The garments, the mirrors, the daily rituals, the quiet moments of reflection, and the patient guidance of my mother had all converged to create a tapestry of self-awareness and personal expression. Life had taught me that identity is a journey, not a destination, and that joy and fulfillment are found in the careful tending of the self through curiosity, reflection, and mindful action. Each morning, as I moved through the familiar rhythms of self-care, wardrobe choices, and personal reflection, I felt a continuity with the past and an openness to the future, a sense that I was both discovering and creating myself in each deliberate gesture, each considered decision, and each thoughtful observation. In these moments, I recognized the beauty of growth, the value of nurturing relationships, and the profound significance of understanding oneself deeply and compassionately. I embrace the ongoing journey with gratitude, curiosity, and joy, carrying forward the lessons of observation, care, and intentional expression that had been instilled in me from a young age, secure in the knowledge that personal identity is not something to be rushed or forced, but something to be discovered, celebrated, and continuously refined through the rich and unfolding tapestry of life, one reflective and purposeful moment at a time.